Can you talk a little about what Channel 8 was, again, when you got there, news-wise? Was it still pretty much ambulance chasing car wrecks, kind of what news is becoming again today in some respects? But how did that evolve under Marty Haag? Because I guess you can't really overemphasize the importance of Marty Haag, who died in, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, is it? Yeah. Was really a legendary local news director, and tons of people went from Channel 8 to the network level under him. But what was his influence on the station? He wasn't an easy man to work for, but I guess you knew he had your back.
Well, yeah, especially in those days, he did. When we came in, when Doug and Byron and I came in and sat down and tore his newscast up for him, and that's essentially what we did. He said, I want you to tear this. We watched the 10 o'clock broadcast, and he said, tell me everything you see that's wrong with this broadcast. And it didn't take us long to determine that what was happening in Dallas-Fort Worth television then was pretty much as it says what's happening today, and that is people in the business were just going out and putting pictures to what was already in the newspaper, or they were going to the police blotter, and that's the easiest thing in the world to cover. There's nothing quite like covering crime news. You can do it like this. Your source is the guy in the uniform, and if you're real lucky, you get there and you get to see the perp as they're doing the perp walk and all of this stuff. But it doesn't really tell you anything about your community. And so we said that to him. I said, we're your investigative reporters. We're your people who are going to get out there and break stories. You ought to be out there setting the pace. He agreed with us. That's why he hired the three of us. And the thing that Marty did is that he could be a grim taskmaster, but if you did your work, he just left you alone. I mean, you didn't get praised, nor did you get admonished for something you did. He just simply left you alone. And what happened was that we had a kind of journalism that was growing up, and it was a beautiful place. Dallas-Fort Worth was the place to be in those days yet, because what was happening simultaneous with all of this stuff is we were trying to set the bar at Channel 8. The Dallas Morning News, which had been a very conservative, very staid paper, no jumps off the front page. The Paul Kroon column ran right on the front page. It was not just by philosophy, but by design. It was one of the most conservative newspapers in the country. And the Dallas Times-Herald started hiring young, good, aggressive reporters, and they really hit the ground running over there. And I remember going to a Katie Awards presentation back when it meant something, and the Dallas Times-Herald walked away with everything. And the people at the Morning News said, look, we've got to shake this thing up. So competition is very good in our business. Very good, the right kind of competition. So as Marty was setting the bar, and we were trying to set the bar at Channel 8, and the other folks had to respond to us, likewise, the Morning News had to respond to the Times-Herald. And even the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, not immediately a competitor, began to raise its own standards over there. It was a great place to practice journalism.
Well, and I remember I got to the Morning News in late '79, way back when, and started doing TV in I think it was June of '80. And I was sort of a young punk, obviously, and I remember writing, I don't remember exactly what I wrote about Tracy. I know it wasn't terribly complimentary. And in those days, you could actually criticize the Channel 8 anchors and get away with it, which didn't persist, obviously. But do you remember anything about that? Because I don't remember even why I wrote that or what and I think you said something on the air.
Yeah, we had a little set too. I remember Mike Shapiro, who was the general manager, coming to me and saying, he said, because I was responding to Ed, and he was saying, why are you giving this guy a platform anyway? And I said, well, it's really good to have this kind of dialogue. And he just sort of shrugged and walked away. I remember Schutz at that time was over at the Dallas Times-Herald, and he wrote a column about it. He said, this is incredible. These guys work for the same company, and they're firing shots back and forth at each other. But like you, I can't remember why we were doing it. I've forgotten what set us off. But But it was fun. I mean, we've had, Ed and I have had our set twos over the years, that's for sure. But, you know, there was something that was very healthy about being able to criticize back and forth. I mean, it was really a reciprocal kind of deal, and not the way it is now, where the WFAA would be afraid, and the Dallas Morning News would be afraid to criticize its sister station.
So you spent a quarter of a century, roughly, at Channel 8, and then comes 1999. Your contract is up for renewal. Things are going a bit slow, and lo and behold, Channel 11 at the same time is being bought by CBS. And the money truck backed up, I guess. And you took the offer. How difficult? I mean, it had to be incredibly difficult in the end to, and I think you maybe felt a bit, maybe not unwanted at Channel 8, but they weren't exactly moving along with a contract renewal. But walk us through what happened and why you decided to go.
Well, Channel 8 had a management change, and that's what happened. Kathy Clementsville came in and took over as general manager, and Dave Lane, those of us who remember Dave, had brain cancer and died, and so there were a lot of changes that were taking place at Channel 8. I remember Kathy called everybody in, and she said, it's very fine when Ed Bark says nice things about us and that we're number one and he writes about that, but that's not really important. What's really important in those days, 18 to 49-year-old women, that's what we want to attract. This is a business, and we will conduct ourselves as business people, and we will do stories that will attract that audience, and this is why we're here. It's a business we want to sell, and that's what we're going to do. So that was really, I mean, I was just aghast. I remember Robert Riggs and Byron and I were standing together and just looking at each other. We couldn't believe that we were actually being told this by a general manager, whether she believed it or not. And so that was such a decided change in philosophy over anything that we had done prior to that time. Because instead of saying the community will come first and journalism will come first, we were saying business will come first, and we will do what we have to do to make more money. So I found myself being in a position as these changes began to take place in the newsroom of being the person who was standing up saying, let's not change this. In fact, what we really need to be doing is doing very aggressive reporting in the marketplace, not trying to pander to certain parts of the audience. But I was just, crying in the wilderness. When my contract came up, just before it came up, Kathy took me to lunch, and she said, we just love you, we want to re-sign you, everything is going to be absolutely great, you're going to love it here, and we want you to have this voice and this platform from now until you retire. And I said, great, and I remember going home and telling Jill, gosh, it was a really great lunch, it worked out very well, and so forth. We were required to submit a letter that said we're not going to renew our contract as it's written. That was required as a part of it. And I didn't submit the letter because after the lunch I thought that we were going to have just a marvelous time together. And it just didn't work out that way. They just weren't forthcoming. Finally, they called me down and essentially wanted to re-sign me, but I think they said, we'll give you like a 3% increase, and we're not going to worry too much about your family. And those of you who know this know that Jill and I worry most about Michael, who now is 21 years old and autistic, and we are Michael's family. And we have to be able to protect him for the rest of his life. And I was asking for a no-cut contract because I was just very dubious about what I was seeing there. And so they offered a 4-year contract, 2 years would be no cut, and after that they could do to me what they wanted to do. And I said, I really don't want to do that. All right, as this is happening, Ron Chapman tells the story that he was good friends with, help me out, the head of CBS at that time, Karmazin.
Al Karmazin?
Yeah, and Karmazin had called, he and Ron were good buddies, and he called Ron and he said, look, no one knows this yet, but we're going to buy Channel 11. And who should we bring on as our anchor there? And Ron says, he said, well, you gotta contact Tracy, that's who you need to contact. So, I mean, it was just a big, just everything kind of fell together. They called me and met with me. Channel 5 also knew about the contract because I wasn't signing a contract at 8. And I met with them as well, although that story will be told in 2 or 3 different ways, but I did. And Jill and I were really anguished. You need to remember, I was Marty Haag's best man at his wedding, and Jill, that's where Jill and I met. Jill was one of the bridesmaids for Susan, Marty's wife, and we were very close, the 4 of us. I mean, there were all these different connections, and so it was a terrible kind of time. But Kathy said, you can't talk, told my lawyer, that's one time I used a lawyer, and said, you can't talk to Marty Haag, and Tracy can't talk to Marty, and Tracy can't talk to Ward Huey. I'm the man, you're going to deal with me. And so since my lawyer agreed to that, I had to agree to it as well. And so they didn't know anything about it until the crap hit the fan. And that's when everybody found it.